In general, what's your reaction to the numbers?
Well, it's always good to be ahead. I did a poll, which I made public in November, and very similar numbers. And I am happy that having made my announcement at the beginning of January and talked about a revenue enhancement proposal, specifically on the exemptions on our sales tax, that my numbers have stayed steady with the November poll that I did. But ultimately what Rhode Islanders do want, they don't care about poll numbers, they just want ideas on how we're going to get Rhode Islanders back to work.
Let's talk about that. During your announcement, you talked about having to increase revenue, and that, in reality, that might be the case. If you exhaust everything, that might be the next step. But in perception, the question we asked about that, only 14% of the people say that they want taxes raised. With your pitch to increase revenue, are you worried about the perception based on those numbers?
No, I'd be one of the 86% that would say, no, I do not want to raise taxes. However, I think when you're looking at the deficits that we're anticipating, $400 million or the like, your options become limited. And the point I want to continually make is that you cannot keep passing it down to the property taxpayer. That's the hardest tax of all. And for the governor saying we're not raising taxes, that's just dishonest, because the mayors and the town managers have to raise them. And the economic experts have said that the least harmful tax to economic growth is a sales tax, and that's why I made my proposal.
Back to the horse race, if you will. Looking at those numbers, who would you rather face, Frank Caprio, Patrick Lynch?
Again, I don't know how this is all going to sort out. There's all these rumors one of them might run as an independent. That if they have a primary, the history shows that those are good. If for the person that doesn't have to go into the primary, I know from 2006. So I hope they do have a primary. But ultimately, when the June filing deadline comes, we'll know who's in the race and how they're running. But in the meantime, my goal is just to communicate to Rhode Islanders the path to prosperity and the hard decisions that have to be made to get this great state on the right track.
All that aside, though, it looks to me like, looking at these numbers, you should be slapping a Patrick Lynch for governor bumper sticker on your car until September. Doesn't it look that way?
You said that, Tim.
All right. Are you surprised at all when you looked at the detail and numbers, how much support you got from Democrats?
Yeah, am I surprised? No, I think there's a lot of independent-leaning Democrats in this state. I think those party delineations have blurred over the years. People really look to the individual. I do believe that. The voters are sophisticated.
Patrick Kennedy called the victory for Scott Brown overblown. Do you agree with him?
Oh no, I think that was a cataclysmic in that, it was just very, very significant in that the combination of factors came together. A year ago, Massachusetts voted 62% for Barack Obama. And a year later, they're sending a Republican to the U.S. Senate. It maybe cataclysmic isn't the right word, but seismic in its the change that the voters in Massachusetts made in 1 year, with a high turnout in both elections, over 2 million in both elections.
You brought up the president. Without stepping foot in Rhode Island, he walked away with 63% of the vote here. In this poll, his favorable is only 51%, unfavorable about 50%. What does that tell you about the mood of the voters?
Yes, there's some dissatisfaction, and it's not all President Obama's fault, of course, considering what he inherited, but there is some dissatisfaction in the promise for change that so many voters expected when they voted for the president, and just haven't realized that change on many fronts.
Overall, the numbers for you are pretty good in this poll. And everyone always says when you interview them, the real poll that matters is, of course, in November. But what matters right now is the ability to raise money. You have loaned yourself a lot of money. Do you think this is the type of poll that could help you fundraise?
I really think more important than fundraising is ideas to get Rhode Island going in the right direction.
Yeah, but
really
to get that message out, Senator, you need money to do it. Isn't that right?
Yes, but that's not the be-all and end-all. And there's a lot of focus on that because that's in the news and people having fundraising and filing their quarterly reports. But I do believe it, and I'm campaigning all over the state. People saying, how are you going to get us going on the right track? That's what they care about. Get our people back to work.
Are you concerned at all that even though the numbers here are positive, as we get closer to the big day, that people will go back to their traditional roots? And Rhode Islanders are very traditional. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Are you concerned that could be a factor down the road?
I do believe, having run as a Republican in Rhode Island in my past elections, and this being a very, very Democratic state, that the voters do look at the individual. And that's, I've seen it time and time again in Rhode Island. And I do believe that's going to happen again in November of 2010.
One of the questions that jumped out to us when we were analyzing it is who people blame for the budget. A resounding finger pointing to the General Assembly. Is that first a fair assessment? And if it is, how would you work with the legislators to right the financial ship?
I believe that's absolutely critical to the success of Rhode Island is the governor working with the General Assembly. And it just takes skill, it takes patience, and it takes experience. And having been a mayor and working with a city council of the opposite party, I have that experience. And so I think it's critical. And that's one of the problems with the status that Rhode Island is in right now. The governor and the General Assembly have not worked well together over the last 8 years.
Let's talk about why that is. The vast majority of Governor Don Carcieri's plans fell on deaf ears up at Smith Hill. What did he do wrong?
I just don't think he had that experience of having worked and knowing the power of the General Assembly. And they have egos and having the skills to work well with them. And I did it in Warwick as mayor of my city, and I know I can do it here as governor. It's absolutely essential.
Of in the plan that you have, what's the one thing that you need the support from the General Assembly on? If you could select one thing and say, look, I need this thing passed, what is it?
Well, the next governor is going to inherit huge budget deficits because the stimulus money will have run out. So that's number one. I don't think any employer coming to Rhode Island to generate the economic growth is going to come to a community where they have chronic budget deficits. And so that's number one. Solve that budget problem and then get our economic growth, focus on economic growth. But they are linked. I don't think employers are going to come, as I said, to a community that can't balance their budget.
Just finally, as one of the questions that we asked was an issues question, and I'm curious what you think about this. Of these, what do you think the voters said were their top three concerns? In no particular order: national security, education, taxes, deficit, economy/jobs, and health care. What are the top three?
Economy/jobs. I don't even think there's a second. People want to be able to work. And Rhode Island's unemployment is just unacceptably high. Third highest in the nation, whatever it is, second highest. It's unacceptable. And we need the leadership to get the growth here and get our people back to work.
The distant second, as you point out, there wasn't even a second, but it was distant, was health care. Does that surprise you at all? Next to the deficit, next to taxes, next to education, health care was still number two.
Yes, I think people are realizing the high cost of it. It having been in the news, of course, on the national front over the last year, probably drove those numbers up.